the model of mindfulness that I want to present involves these three core elements of intention, attention, and attitude. And I want to talk about each of these. This is the definition from our book. Mindfulness is the awareness that arises out of intentionally paying attention in an open, kind, and discerning way. So this is all we're trying to do. It doesn't necessarily have to do with meditation practice. We practice so we can remember to be this way moment by moment. So first I'll speak about intention. Intention is simply knowing why you're doing what you're doing. What is your aspiration, your vision, your personal goal? Intention really sets the compass of our heart. It says, this is the direction I want to go in. Not necessarily I must get there, but this is the direction I want to head. It's not a destination. It's not goal-oriented. We're not striving to get a certain place. We're just setting the compass of our heart. John Kabat-Zinn says, your intentions set the stage for what is possible. They remind you from moment to moment of why you are practicing. He says, I used to think meditation practice was so powerful that as long as you did it at all, you would see growth and change. But time has taught me that some kind of personal vision is necessary. I'll give you a very simple example that happened last year. I was teaching in Europe for 2 weeks, and it was the longest I'd been away from my little boy, Jackson. And as I was flying home, I was having all these feelings of guilt, right? He was 7 at the time, and I felt like it was too long to have been away, and should I have done this, and it was wrong, and I realized guilt wasn't really helping. So I made a very clear intention. When I get home, I just want to be with my son, and I want him to know Mom's home, and that I love him, and he's safe. And that's it. I'm not going to check email. I'm not going to check my mail. I'm really going to focus. I was getting home on a Friday night, and I figured Saturday we were going to spend the entire day together, and that was it. And we were going to go to the beach. So we woke up the next morning, and I start packing up for the beach and making the perfect lunch and the perfect picnic and getting all his stuff and really excited to show him how much I love him. And he, in the meantime, was like, hey, Mom, come look at this. Hey, Mom. And I was like, okay, just a second. Still doing my thing. Yeah, this isn't going to turn out well. And so we're starting to go get ready to the beach. And I'm like, hey, Jackson, let's go. And he's like, I don't really want to go to the beach. I was like, honey, come on. It's beautiful. It's sunny. We're going to the beach. He's like, okay, puts on his bathing suit. We're walking out the door, and I'm like 5 steps ahead of him. And I get to the car, and I look back, and he's sitting down on our front porch. And I'm like, Jackson. And I feel that kind of contraction in my body, a little bit of impatience. And he's just sitting there. And I start noticing the tension in my body of I have an agenda and I have a plan. It's going to be wonderful. Luckily, I'd been teaching mindfulness for the past 2 weeks straight. So I had this moment of awareness, and I reflected, what's my intention? Oh, yeah, I just want him to know that I love him and that I'm home. And so I walked back over, and I sat down next to him. And he was looking at these ants. That's actually why he was sitting there. And they were pretty extraordinary. And I sat down next to him, and I just sat there quietly, and I was breathing, and I was with him. And he kind of leaned his little body into my body. And I could feel the sun on our backs, and I could feel us resting, us connecting. And that was it. That was the most important thing, right? So our intention reminds us what is most important. And it can be that simple. So present moment awareness is essential if we're going to see clearly, right? That's the definition of mindfulness. And yet what we found, in fact, this study was published, I think, 2 years ago with 650,000 subjects, is that our mind wanders approximately half the time. They found that 46.9% of the time, your mind is wandering. That's a lot of your life. So part of this practice is learning how to attend in the present moment. And it doesn't mean we shut out our thoughts. It doesn't mean we no longer have any thoughts. We have 12 to 50,000 thoughts every single day. You're not going to make those go away. What we start to do is change our relationship to thinking so that we can rest more in the actuality of the present moment. so we don't believe our thoughts so much. I love this quote from Emo Phillips. He says, "I used to think the brain was the most wonderful organ in my body. Then I realized he was telling me this." Right? Right? Don't believe your thoughts. Okay. So the intention with mindfulness is that we train and stabilize our attention in the present moment so that we can see clearly. I actually believe one of the most healing dimensions of mindfulness is just that our mind and our body are in one place. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be sitting here and have your mind racing all over the place. So part of this practice is learning how to just let ourselves rest in the present moment and know that where we are is okay. This is enough. So this is a picture of a monastery that I visited when I was first learning about meditation. And when I first went there, I didn't know anything about meditation. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I didn't speak any Thai. And this beautiful monk invited me in for this 12-day silent retreat, and he didn't speak any English. So he kind of, made it clear that I was supposed to attend to my breath going in and out of my nostrils. Said I can probably handle that. Pay attention in the present moment to the breath. So I'm sitting there, and guess what I noticed? It's not so easy. Right? My mind wandered, and it would wander off, and I'd bring it back, and I would try harder, and I would try harder, and I would try harder, and I got really impatient and really frustrated, and I would sit there, and I would breathe, and my mind would wander off, and eventually I was like, "Damn it, Shauna, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do this? And who do you think you are to try to be a meditator? You're not a meditator. You don't know what you're doing." And then all of a sudden, by like the second or third day, I was looking around at everyone else at the monastery, and I'm like, who do they think they are? And just this judgmental mind of like tension and contraction. And then this monk on day 4 flew in from London, and he spoke English. And I said, can I please have an interview with him? Because you're in silence the whole time, too, so it's just you and your mind. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. I remember now, Anne Lamott, who is one of my favorite authors, she says, your mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. You don't want to go there alone. So it was me and my mind alone, and it was dangerous. And this monk came in, and he said, how's it going? And I was like, not so well. This is what's happening. I'm getting really angry at myself and anxious and judgmental, and I'm striving and I'm trying. And he looks at me and he goes, oh dear. He's like, you're not practicing mindfulness. He said, you're practicing frustration, anxiety, impatience. And then he said these 5 words that really changed my life. He said, what you practice becomes stronger. What you practice becomes stronger. We know this now from neuroplasticity. We know that your repeated experiences shape your brain. What he said was that when you practice paying attention, how you practice is important. Your attitude. Are you paying attention with acceptance, with openness, with curiosity? What does it feel like to be hot or to have your mind wander off? With kindness, with gentleness, with warmth, with a sense of trust. This is what's happening right now, and it's okay, because it's just what's happening. I might not like it, but it's already happening, so can I be present with it and kind? These qualities, these attitudes, it doesn't mean that you feel happy all the time. It doesn't mean that everything's okay all the time. What it means is that you have this big pot of experience, and that whatever is arising, you're holding with kindness. You're holding your fear with kindness. You're holding your sadness with kindness and with curiosity. You're interested in your own experience. You're interested in what it feels like to be alive. Sometimes I think of it as like I'm my own parent, and like my little Shauna's coming to me and saying like, I'm really angry right now. And I'm like, tell me about it. What's going on? Right? I'm not trying to make it go away. I'm not trying to tell her she needs to feel happy and joyful all the time, but I'm holding it with kindness, and it's okay. With my patients, there's a way in which whatever they bring into the room is absolutely okay. It's absolutely okay. I first have to get there with myself, though. I first have to allow myself to be absolutely okay with however I'm feeling. this is just what I'm feeling right now. This is just what's happening right now. And it's okay. And I can be with it.
Taking this opportunity to arrive. To arrive in this place at this time, in this moment, to be present. To be present to our own experience in the company of others. So bringing attention to our senses, the sense of sound, wherever it is, whatever it is. Not so much seeking after sound, but receiving what is there. Our job is to simply pay attention, to be a witness to our own experience. So noticing sounds, how sounds change, vary, come and go. And then bringing the awareness to the body, sensations in the body. Noticing points of contact with the body, with the chair and the floor. The hands resting on the legs or the table in front of us. Just generally becoming aware of the body. Noticing any areas of strong sensation. If we sense that our posture needs adjustment, making minor adjustments. Finding that place of groundedness and balance. Finding a steady foundation in our posture. And then bringing the attention to the breath. To the in-breath and the out-breath. Just allowing the breath to breathe. Allowing the breath to find its natural rhythm, in and out. Steady, easy, natural. Noticing how on the in-breath there's a beginning, middle, and end. And on the out-breath, there's a beginning, middle, and end. Noticing the beginning, middle, and end coming in and going out. Experiencing the full length of the breath in and out. The felt experience of the breath. Perhaps not only experiencing the breath in the area of the nose and the nostrils, but perhaps sensing the breath in the area of the torso, in the area of the chest and upper back, How the chest rises and falls with the in-breath and out-breath. Or in the area of the stomach and abdomen, the expanding and contracting with the in-breath and the out-breath. Or perhaps the entire torso, filling and emptying the front of the torso, the back of the torso, the sides. Steady, easy, natural. Allowing the breath to settle into the body, the foundation of the body, solid, grounded. So finding that place in our breath where for us the breath is most alive, most vivid, most noticeable. The nose, the chest, the stomach, or any place else where it's most noticeable. Noticing how each breath, like each moment, is unlike the past, different than the next, unique, alive. So spending time with the breath, paying attention to our experience. Establishing a platform of steadiness, of calm, of readiness, open to our experience as it arises before us. Noticing thoughts, feelings, images, sounds, sensations in the body. Simply paying attention. Knowing that when we're distracted and the mind wanders, we can always come back to the breath. For the breath is always present, always now. And each and every time we connect the mind to the breath, we bring the mind back into the present. Once again, open to the richness of our experience. One breath at a time. Can always come back to the breath. Well, we just saw that wonderful video with Shauna Shapiro, and took some quiet time. And I do have an agenda for today. But before we move on, if there's any thoughts or reflections either about the meditation or about Shauna Shapiro and her experiences, some of the ideas that she forwarded, any thoughts or reflections on any of that?
When I close my eyes during like the meditation, and at the end, I always wait until the third bell to finally just open them. But it's kind of like the first two, I'm just like bringing myself back, preparing for, being present. And then when I open my eyes, everything just seems way more crisp and more vibrant. It's just something that I've noticed after the few times that I've been here and done that, that when I open my eyes, everything is very there and very vivid.
Yeah. I love the way you languaged it. That's very descriptive. Thank you. Yeah. Makes me want to do it. Yeah, thank you.
I've been imagining the breath, the in and the out. And at first I thought it was like a pendulum, bringing it in and then out. But I find myself more calm when I imagine it more as a circle, like bringing it in to the top and letting it out.
Wow, what
So
a wonderful
more of a
image.
circle.
Yeah.
Because the swing ends and then ends. You know what I mean? There's an ending as opposed to the circle, which really doesn't have it. It's the most momentary pause at the top of the hour. So
It's almost like the breath is, rather than being a break in the breath, it's like continuous. Yeah, that's a wonderful image. This is great. The day is already a success for me. On those two comments, I just learned so much. Thank you. Other thoughts or ideas or experiences?
Shauna talked about her agenda with her son, and I think we've all been there, especially maybe as mothers, who tend to plan all the activities and by God, you're going to have fun. Rather than thinking about just being in the moment with your children or whatever. You plan and you do all these things so that they'll have fun, but you kind of lose sight of what you're really there for.
Yeah.
Really, that hit home.
I would say I cannot count the number of times that lack of intentionality has been present for me. But it seems to me the older the kids get, the more important it is to just be with them on whatever terms it is. Because the older they are, the more different it gets.
And the less opportunities you have to, the opportunities to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, so if I'm caught up in mindlessness, whatever form that takes, it can be easy to lose sight of what my original intention was. It's like my mindless activity takes on an intention of its own, which is, in this case, different than the one she had intended, right? I got my agenda, we're going to do this, we're going to have fun, or else. Yeah. Other thoughts? I think it's interesting that typically we have 12 to 50,000 thoughts a day, and that 95% of them are the same. So if we're mind wandering 47% of the time, which is half our waking hours, most of that is the same old thing over and over and over again. Just thinking about it makes me weary. And we've all had that experience of that, where we just think and think and think, we ruminate. Yeah. And I like the way she described it, how we can be like this in our mind, is just going around like this. And that was a good visual for me. Any other thoughts before we move on?
should I tell my airlines?
I wish you would. That's a wonderful story.
Yeah, I missed the last session because I was traveling from Grand Rapids to Phoenix, and how traveling is an ordeal. We all know that, and I had to rush through the airport in Phoenix because the flight out of Grand Rapids was late, and that was, and I was starting to worry, will I actually run and catch that last flight, because there was none other leaving Houston from Phoenix, and they told me I was lucky that I was actually on board, and when I got to the very, very back of a very crowded airplane, and someone sitting in my window seat, and these 250-pound men, they were equally sized, and these were twin brothers, and I had to squeeze into a half a seat, and he was so large that his elbows had to come into my chest, and I had to quickly learn to accommodate that and start getting okay with the unair conditioned airplane and sitting next to the lavatory and not in my window seat. And I couldn't read. There was no distraction. It was time to get mindful, and so it was this time to calm down. And over the course of the flight, he would look over and wonder if I was being annoyed, but no, I wasn't. I was actually at a very kind place, and again, allowing him to, because of his physical needs, to kind of get into my space. And and it made I found a comfortable place to sit despite all this, and I think it was because of the breathing techniques and the things that we had talked about the first session or two. So thank you.
Thank you. Did you use mindfulness while you were there in the, I mean,
Yes.
did you practice the breathing and everything
Yeah,
while you were
yeah.
there? And that's what comes.
Yeah, and I had a little practice on the flight down before I got to this, troubled flight to Phoenix. So the Grand Rapids to Houston, I was just thinking about the techniques and just relaxing myself as practice, which later on I needed. Yeah, and the flight was 2.5 hours, and it didn't quite seem as long as that.
Yeah.
Because of the mindfulness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I want to just say real quick, the effects of not being mindful. This week, I just misplaced my keys halfway through the day, and I was in a panic shock and wasn't able to find them for a good 24 hours. The cleaning person was able to get to them, but at any given moment, a small thing like that could really ruin it. So even opening the door and knowing where the keys are, or your wallet. Are you kidding?
Yep, I bet a whole lot of us can identify with that. Yep. Well, what Shannon Shapiro talks about is intention, attitude, intention, attention, and attitude. And if you would look at this handout I gave you, the basic idea behind this is that as an individual, there's something that I can do, something that I can bring to an interaction with another person, whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's a meeting. And that is a mindfulness state of mind. I can be clear on what my intention is. I can know what it is I have to pay attention to. And I can know not only what kind of attitude serves this interaction, but more importantly, what is my attitude in this moment? And so if we have some clarification on what is my intention, what is my motive, what is it I'm supposed to pay attention to, what kind of attitude, that's very helpful, because if, let's say, I start with anxiety, or I start with fear, or I start with resentment, clearly that's going to affect whatever I'm doing, particularly if it's operating below a level of awareness, right? And so that kind of strong thinking emotion that underlies that is going to significantly influence my behavior in whatever I do. But if I'm aware of that or whatever else it is that is going on with me, I have that moment of mindfulness, I may still have those strong feelings, I may still have those strong thoughts, but because they're in that container, because they're in that pot, I have a little bit different relationship to them, and I'm in a position to choose. And so I may not act on that resentment. I may not act on that ill feeling. In fact, awareness itself has a lot to mitigate some of that stuff. If we're aware of it and we can hold it, it loses some of its power on us. Not entirely. I had some anxiety today that hasn't gone completely away despite the fact I've meditated and stuff but it's there. And that's okay. And I love the way she says it. She says, acceptance is really just recognizing that that's the way it is, and then be willing to hold it. And I love that definition of acceptance. Acceptance for me isn't something emotional. It's kind of like, this is the way it is, and I'll work with it. That's okay. And so that's what mindfulness does. So I'm bringing the best possible me into any situation if I'm being mindful. So if I recognize that my motive might be one of self-interest, I can choose a different motive. I can choose to operate for the good of the group or the good of the person. So beginning with that awareness gives me choice that I might not have. So of all the suggestions that I can make in dealing with other people, and we'll be doing a lot of that as we talk about speaking and listening over the next couple of weeks, if I can be aware of my own intention and then choose the intention appropriate to the situation, I would assume it's the good one, okay? And then I know what to pay attention to. And then I also know what my attitude is and what kind of attitude to bring to the situation. So in any time I'm interacting with anybody or doing any kind of thing, if I can do that, then it will go a long ways towards making whatever we're doing much better. Now that's not that difficult to remember. So intention, attention, an attitude. And so when I meditate or when I do anything in life, what is my attitude? What kind of attitude do I want to bring to this? And that's very challenging, isn't it? So if I'm experiencing some kind of fear or anxiety or hurt, to bring kindness to that is really difficult. But once I begin to learn to be mindful and I learned to put a container around things, to view them in a pot, that does lighten the load. That does lessen the burden. It isn't that I don't have those feelings, I don't have those thoughts. I do, I think them, I feel them, I experience them, they're uncomfortable, they're painful, they're this and that. But the fact that they are in a container changes my relationship to them and the power they have on me. And one of the lessons of mindfulness is that if I am holding on to something, you know, whether it's through my judgment or through my concerted efforts to make it go away, okay, in fact, I am really working against the very thing that I desire, which is freedom. And so I have to release that. I have to let go of it. And so if I can experience that in awareness, even for a moment, I'm letting go. I'm releasing. And this is why it works. And the research is pretty clear. After one develops mindfulness practice, they develop self-regulation of thought and emotions. Their mind stabilizes. They're not as reactive emotionally. They're more resilient. They don't get worked up as much. And why? Because what happens is we learn to hold it in that container. We learn to let it go. So if I'm coming into an interaction or a meeting or whatever, then what I want to do is have at least some sense of, you know, okay, what is my purpose? What is my attitude? And is this the intention I choose? Is this the attitude I choose? And it may or may not be. So in that awareness, we can perhaps release it. Now, I wasn't able to release all of the anxiety I had, but a lot of it, you know. And so that's kind of the idea behind it. Now, the second part, this is the critical thinking part. Now, you'll recall, and I sent you out the model, and I'll send it out again, but you'll recall that what Richard Paul says is that whenever we are thinking or communicating, all thinking has certain parts. And he broke it down into 8 parts. He said if you're going to be thorough, whenever you look at a thought or a series of thoughts, whether it's a conversation or an essay or whatever, you always have to look at all of these parts. And you recall that some of those parts were parts that we don't normally think of. And so he said for every communication, there's always the perceptions of those involved in the communication, the writer, the readers, okay, the various points of view that might be expressed within the text. He also talked about how we have different assumptions, okay? He also talked about how there's always implications, stuff we don't anticipate happening that might well happen. And so those are areas where we want to get things out on the table. But there's also the standards. The way, and these are the criteria that we use to evaluate the parts, to assess how well we're using them, but also to improve them. And they are the easiest to work with and to understand. And if we use the parts well, we really will be getting at the elements. And so we're going to get right to what I consider the most important standards. And they are, my acronym for them was CAPS. So we're going to put our caps on. We're going to put on our critical thinking caps. And I thought of going so far as to getting caps for our group today, but I didn't want to spend the money. But still, it's a clever idea. So imagine now you're putting on your critical thinking cap. Okay, you're putting it on a mindful mind. Okay, you are paying attention. You are attentive to what's happening in the situation. You are aware of things as they arise into your own awareness. Okay, that isn't your primary focus. We've determined here in the first part here that what I want to do is pay attention to the activity at hand, but that's my primary focus. But I'm not ignoring what else comes into my experience. Okay, so I have my mindfulness, but now I have put my cap on: clarity, accuracy, precision, and significance. Richard Paul, who I had the good fortune of spending a lot of time with for a while, always believed that clarity was the single most important thing in critical thinking. That if we could get clarity, that we would address really just about everything else. So the question is, what is clarity and how do we get there? Clarity can be talked about a lot of different ways. You can talk about clarity. We can talk about things being lucid. But lucid for whom? When you're involved with a communication with someone else, whether you're writing a message to them, whether it's a kind of an interaction, the goal is to make sure that there is common understanding. That you understand this as I intend, okay? And that's number one, but also there's more than that. I have to know that you understand, okay? We have to know that each of us understands each other's understanding. Another way of saying that is, I see your perception, you see mine. As we look at this common problem, whatever it is that we're addressing, we acknowledge, we see how each other sees it. That may not mean that we agree. That's a whole different thing. But in acknowledging, recognizing each other's position, that is huge. In fact, I argue, and the research does kind of suggest this, that most conflict can be resolved if we simply understand each other's perceptions. But typically in conflict, we don't do that. We're arguing from positions. It's an either or, a win-lose. But when we're taking the opportunity to know each other's perceptions, that's by its very nature is a win-win. It's collaborative. Okay? And what's interesting in doing that, we'll often find our commonality, what we have in common. You know? And there's usually an emotional core there that we connect with. But as a practical matter, what I want to do with clarity then is make sure everybody understands everybody's understanding. Now that's no easy task, is it? That involves things like really good listening skills and really good speaking skills. Well, guess what? That's what we're going to be doing the next 2 weeks. We're going to be looking at ways of speaking mindfully and listening mindfully as a way of getting that clarity. But good communication does take work. Both people need to be able to say, yeah, I understand you. And the other person needs to be able to say, yes, I know you do understand me. If we can say that at the conclusion of the conversation, we probably addressed a whole lot of other stuff. Issues of perception, issues of assumptions. You know, these are parts of our of thinking. So clarity first and foremost, whatever it takes to get clarity. Now, some things that we can do to get clarity is to have facts. Lots of facts. How many decisions do we make, bad decisions do we make based on lack of facts, assumptions? Or worse yet, thinking it's a fact when in fact it's really an inference. An inference. One of the courses that the criminal justice students take has to do with how to report a crime. And I always love getting in my interpersonal class because what they have to do is they have to learn the difference between a fact and an inference. When they're writing up the report, all they're supposed to include in there are the facts. And what is the first part of a trial in a court? The first trial is all about what constitutes the facts of the case. That has to be established before they ever get to the trial. And it's all about, and then what happens is, in the trial, they make all of these inferences, all these judgments based on the set of facts. And so both sides are very, very persistent about what they wanted included in there because that, of course, will be the basis of their argument they'll make later. So we have to be clear, is this an inference or is it a fact? But as a rule of thumb, the more information we have, the more accurate information we have, the better position we are to make a decision, right? So if I'm in a meeting, I'm going to be pushing for clarity, and I'm going to be really trying to get all the facts on the table. Now, if I'm the designated leader, I can just kind of do that, right? But what if I'm not the designated leader? Does that mean I can't exert leadership? Is there a way I can do leadership and kind of really push for these kinds of things in kind of an assertive way? Or can I just simply do them as a matter, because that's the way I do business? I just keep trying to get clarification. I just keep pursuing the facts. So maybe you can get an agreement with the group and get them to go through this list with you, maybe not. But if I model that and persist in that, then things can change, can't they? Okay, and then the third one is precision. What are the specifics? Do we have enough information? And then finally, significance. Of the 8 standards, there's a couple that pair well together, and one of them is relevance and significance. And so we ask and we gather information as we get clarity, is it relevant? But most of the thing, is it significant? Are we getting to the heart of the matter? Are we really getting to the most important stuff? And it's interesting, there's therapists in the room, and I think they would probably confirm this is true. I know this from myself because not only when I observed therapy, part of my graduate program, but as I went through therapy, you know, it's kind of like you typically don't talk about the most important stuff until the very last, till you're ready to get out the door, right? Yeah. So the significant stuff doesn't naturally come up. It's kind of like stuff that's put off to the very last. So we have to ask that question again and again. Have we really got it? What's most important here? You know, ask it one more time. It's kind of like saying, well, what do you feel? Someone's wife, no, what do you really feel? And then maybe one more time, what do you really, really feel? Because each time we ask that question, it challenges us to go just a little deeper, a little deeper. And that significant question is kind of like that. You know, what's really most important here? So, if we put on our thinking caps, our critical thinking caps, and we work through these series of questions either alone or corporately, we can really, really improve the quality of our thinking and our decision making. But most important of all, from a mindfulness perspective, if I make that fundamental change in me, if I develop that quality of mindfulness, if I'm committed to improving my critical thinking, then in whatever I participate in, it will have an impact. It will have an impact. So, put on your thinking caps. Any questions or comments or thoughts? Now, I'm curious, can you see a situation that you've either been in or will be in or in all the time where this might be of some use? That's where the rubber meets the road. Does this have some application for you? And maybe you adapt it. That we always adapt it.
Being a welding engineering student, I did an internship this last summer, and I worked with a team of engineers. And a lot of times when like parts come bad off any production line, we'd have to go and figure out why and solve it. Well, there'd be a team of engineers, and a lot of times there'd be a lot of just arguing. Because this is what we should do. This is what we should do. And I'd always step back and just look at the situation. I'm an intern anyway, so I really don't have any say. But I could see definitely using mindfulness and a team of solving one issue instead of sitting there and arguing. It's not going to get anywhere.
I really like that because it's kind of like you were the container around what they were doing, and you're kind of going, look at this craziness, just like we could look at our own craziness. So you had that perspective. Yeah, that's great. There were other thoughts.
I imagine that this would come in very handy when being confronted, say, with an evaluation. Whether it's as a professor, we get evaluated by students, we have SAIs, or whether your department chair is giving you an evaluation. For you to be able to take on the other person's perspective would be key to learning.
Yeah.
Accepting that criticism, so to speak.
Yeah.
I used to be a court reporter, and I remember some very good judges that would actually do this, and thank goodness, while the attorneys are making all sorts of assumptions and inferences trying to sway a jury, and he would have to object, and but he can't say anything. The judge has to wait till the other attorney objects. But they definitely need to be aware of all this if you want to reveal the truth, so you can make a good decision. But this applies to anybody, anywhere, everywhere, in couples, families, coming from a therapist point of view too, just in every walk of life.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other applications?
And certainly it applies personally as well as professionally, for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here today. I will send out links to all the materials. If you'd like, we can take 2 minutes of silence before we go. Bringing the attention to the breath, the in breath and out breath. Knowing that any time, any place that our mind is unsettled, that we can always come back to the breath. Come back to our breath. A breath that is steady, that is easy, that is alive. So allowing that steadiness, that easiness, alive to settle into our bodies. Recognizing who we really are. Taking the opportunity to use the breath to stabilize the mind. Providing a platform of awareness. The opportunity to pay attention, to notice our experience, to provide perspective on it, and opportunity. So bring in this quality of mindfulness in all we say and do, knowing that any time, any place, when our mind wanders, when we're distracted, we can always come back. Always come back to the present by simply paying attention to the breath.